Hi, it's Ron, and I'm going to make a little video about suicide. And, well, we can call it my suicide prevention video. I'm filming this early morning, September 10th, and September 10th, I've been told, is Suicide Prevention Day, and September is also considered Suicide Prevention Month and also Recovery Month. And those two kind of go hand in hand. Um, I have, I think I have some somewhat unique insight into it, having been, uh, very close to uh, committing suicide myself many times in the past. A lot of that was what my therapist refers to as passive suicide, when someone, wouldn't be an official suicide, but someone is just so hell bent on destroying themselves that the end result is the same. And then there's the more active one, and I wanted to, and I've been on the other side where there's been a few people very near and dear to me who died by suicide, and um, then one, my best friend in the universe, James, I would consider his, now he didn't die by suicide, but officially, but I would call it a passive suicide because he spent uh, several years intent on destroying himself, just through, just reckless behavior. And I have some insight in that just because I tried to do that to myself for quite a long time. Basically, I wanted to cover a few things though, and one of them is the uh, I'll just call it a myth that when people say people who die by suicide are selfish, or that it's a very selfish act. And I get that on the surface, but what people need to understand about that, and this is how you can help people who might be suicidal. This is one of many ways you can help. Uh, Knowledge is power, and you can help understand them a little better and learn learn more effective ways of helping them. And that is that I'll say it's not a selfish act. They're not consciously thinking, well, I'll show them, and I'll just do this. It's more of, I think that probably a large majority of people who consider suicide, they're just in so much emotional and mental pain, and sometimes physical too, that they just want it to end. They just want the pain to end. So they're not consciously thinking, and that's not from a standpoint of selfishness. They're just so overwhelmed and so drowning in their own pain. Again, emotional, spiritual, their mental pain, and again, sometimes physical. Um, Sometimes people who have physical ailments decide to take that route, that they feel like that's the only option. Now they're wrong that it's the only option, but I'm just telling you from a standpoint of someone who's been there at the verge many times, that that's how they truly feel, that that's their only option. So unfortunately they make that choice. And I'll say I'm making this video to try to educate people on this. I share my own recovery story and I share that in my mental health advocacy, just for that reason, to try to help people better understand, and also for people who are struggling with these issues to, number one, let them know they are not alone, and also things get better if you do reach out for help. And anyone watching this who is struggling, and I still have my days, my hours, my moments where I struggle. One of my favorite phrases is recovery is not a linear process. And you have to understand that too, that everyone's gonna have days where they struggle, no matter where they're at in their recovery journey. But I'll say it gets better. I'll share the biggest mistakes I made along the way. And by the way, September 7th made 2 years and 4 months of sobriety for me. And getting sober made a huge difference. Now, by that point, I really had very infrequent suicidal ideations by that point. But getting sober almost completely eliminated that. It's been quite a while since I had any suicidal ideation. Probably at least a year, maybe close to 2 years. It's been quite a while. But lost my train of thought there. My point being my biggest mistakes was thinking I could do it on my own, that I could handle things on my own. And handling things on my own often meant drinking heavily and going on that self-destructive path. So I was self-medicating, doing a lot of self-medicating and everything, going down that self-destructive path. The best thing that I did for myself was I kept at it, reaching out for help. Now, that's can be a difficult path, especially like in my instance, I didn't have insurance and I didn't have money. So, and at that time, this went on for decades, but when everything really reached its peak was after the Boston Marathon bombings in 2013. By that time, I didn't know much at all about organizations like NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. Of course, I knew about the suicide hotline, and I had called them a couple times, and they were very helpful. But I didn't know about these different places you could, and there weren't as many of them, and they weren't as well known to everyone, and there weren't as many. So there's that. But I found ways to keep going. Like for me, focusing on Boston Marathon every April, that was a huge difference maker in keeping me going. That no matter how bad I felt, no matter how destructive I was obsessed. I ran 17 Boston Marathons in a row from 2001 to 2017, and especially long before the bombings in 2013, but much more so after them. Just focusing on that, always focusing on next April, Patriots Day in Boston. That's when we traditionally have the Boston Marathon. This year, because of the pandemic, it's kind of messed up. It's going to be October 11th. So coming up fast. I won't be there, unfortunately. Probably 2023 April 2023 before I run Boston again. But it was having that connection, and that's really important. Having that connection, and that's one of the biggest things that people undergoing difficult times and having suicidal thoughts. I think one of the biggest things they feel is that disconnect, and they tend to feel, of course everyone's a little different, but they tend to feel very isolated, disconnected, and that just feeds all the negative stuff. So I had that Boston Marathon connection, not just the event, but the people involved in it. I formed some great friendships over the years because of the Boston Marathon, and it also gave me a way to connect with people in general, especially after the bombings. I started running with my flag every day, my USA flag every day, and that really resonated with people, to my surprise, because I was just doing it for myself, honestly, and had formed that connection with people. I saw that this meant something to people, and of course it doesn't have to be the Boston Marathon for people. There's all different kinds of things. For some people it's music, some people it's music, art, other things, whatever feeds your soul, I should say. And that's really, I won't call it advice, I'm sharing my experience. That's really what kept me going. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people going, is they find something that they connect with. With my dog Zeus and my dog Pretty Girl before him, they were instrumental as well. And these kind of things got me through to the finish line of finally finding effective therapy. My first therapist in 2016 was clearly not the right one for me, and briefly stopped my downward spiral. But when I found my current therapist in August 2017, then started doing cognitive therapy, and that was very effective, and that not only stopped my downward spiral, but I started really moving forward. But there was definitely I was making great progress, but then when I started my sobriety May 7th, 2019, that was another clear delineation. And speaking of, the biggest thing that did for me is give me clarity, which I think generally takes a few months into sobriety before you start getting that clarity. And that led to all kinds of things for me. Led to forgiving Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the surviving Boston Marathon bomber. That led to I'll say, can't say reconciliation because we were always at odds, but it led to, it was several months before, maybe a year before my brother's death in 2019, that we started talking. He had reached out to me, and he knew he was dying, so I think he reached out to me from a place of sincerity for the first time in his life. And after consulting my therapist, I decided to just return a phone call just to see where he was coming from. And he was very intent on making amends to me, at least verbally, that he fully realized the impact of things he had done and said over all those decades. And before he died, he really wanted to he really wanted to make amends as best he could, and I'll say he did. I'll give him massive credit for that. And unfortunately, a lot of times it takes a death to for people to reach that point where they're ready to, uh, correct their past errors, or make amends. So, see, all that, it's that journey, but the biggest thing that kept me going was that connection to things, and which I understand as well as anyone with mental health conditions, that can be very difficult. Can definitely easier said than done, because I was diagnosed with depression, PTSD, anxiety disorder, ADD, and a whole mishmash of things, and that makes things much more difficult and complicated. But I just wanted to throw some things out there, and this video is getting much longer than I had intended. But to people who have friends or family who are struggling, or even might be coworkers who you think might be struggling, again, remember, they are not being selfish. They're just so overwhelmed with everything that they just don't see a way out, that they're just drowning in it. They're so overwhelmed, they don't see a way out. And the best thing that you can do is active listening, and that's listening without judging. I've made a couple podcasts about this and a couple videos of that. Just talking to them. Take somebody to lunch and just talk to them. You don't have to talk about depression or mental health, any mental health conditions, whatever, if they don't want to. For a lot of us who have struggled, just the simple act of someone taking us to lunch or dinner and just say, "Hey, how you been?" And then you can ask, "How have you been?" What's going on? And if you just sit there and actively listen without judging, and without throwing in little caveats like turn that frown upside down, and being happy is a choice, and or you just need Jesus, and things like that, that's not what they want to hear, and that's not going to work for most people. Just knowing that someone cares. I'll give you a perfect example. At the 2017 Boston Marathon, ended up in the medical tent after the race. Not anything serious. I was just feeling like seriously woozy and just not feeling right. And I had quit my therapist, my first therapist, in 2016. I quit him and quit taking Wellbutrin cold turkey, which was a bad idea. I quit going to the support group that he had. Quit I'll just say an online friendship that abruptly ended. That I quit that too, and that was all within a short period. But anyway, ended up at Boston Marathon, April 2017, and that was several months after I had left my first therapist. And so I really was backsliding. I'd made some brief progress and everything, but I really was spiraling downward and everything. And in the med tent, just the nurse examined me and everything, and my vitals were checking out okay and everything. But when we started talking about the Boston Marathon, naturally I told her at that time, because that was my 17th straight Boston. So she said, "Oh, so you ran the year of the bombings." People always ask about that, and I'm perfectly willing to talk about it when they just genuinely are interested. And of course, as we're talking about it, I think she had volunteered that year. As we're talking about it and everything, of course, I get emotional about it, and I think more so because I had left therapy, so that stuff was hitting me harder again. And as we're talking to her, I saw a man standing. A man was walking by, part of the medical staff, but he stopped, and it kind of looked like he was listening to us. And after about 5 minutes, he walked over and leaned over and told her something, and walked off because the medical tent after the Boston Marathon is a very busy place. Lots going on, a lot of people there. Well, what he told her was, tell Ron he needs to get back in therapy and consider, and maybe get back on his medication. And she said, and that was Dr. Brown, who's the official psychologist of the Boston Marathon, Dr. Jeffrey Brown. And that I was like, really? And she said, yeah. And so before I left, I stayed there for a few more minutes. They were just finishing up checking me out and everything. Before I left the med tent, I found him, and we were able to talk for maybe 8 or 10 minutes, whatever. And so, I said, yeah, nurse so-and-so told me what you said. And he said, yeah, well, he just said, Ron, I could just hear you talking about it, and I could see that, the bombing still have this huge impact on you, which is normal. But he said, I really want you to get back in therapy. Then he asked where I was from and everything, and of course, I live here in Dallas, so unfortunately, I couldn't be one of his patients. Otherwise, I would have been. But he strongly suggested that I get back in therapy, and that was a gigantic turning point. And it meant so much to me then, and means even more to me now. Just the fact that Dr. Jeffrey Brown, the official psychologist of the Boston Marathon, and he's very well known nationally. He's been on ESPN, and he's written books about sports psychology and all this other stuff. And he's over by Harvard. And just the fact that he showed that personal interest in caring about me, about little old me, that just made a huge difference. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, where, of course, he has the standpoint of a psychologist, so that gives him a leg up, I guess, on talking about these things. But from my standpoint, it didn't have to do with him being a psychologist. It had more that did have a standing, but it had more to do with him taking an active interest in me and listening and caring, because he's a very genuine person. And that's what I'm talking about people who might be struggling. Don't underestimate how much power that has when you just show that. Of course, in person is always best, but if you can't, in person, phone calls are always second best. Phone calls or video calls are good. Just being there, that old phrase about being there, that can make a gigantic difference with someone. So that's about it. I just wanted to share my thoughts on that, and this video has become ridiculously long, but uh, that's it. So again, understand that people undergoing these problems, that are going through this difficult journey, that they're not being selfish, that they're just struggling. It's simple as that. They're just struggling, and they just don't know what to do. And for people who are struggling out there, again, know that if you, you can find ways to push forward and survive, and it does get better. That when you do that, when you start connecting with people, that if you find those connections to different things, that propels you on your journey, and it does make a difference. It does make things a little easier, and just know that it gets better, and also just know that you have these things within you. I always end up referring, and I will again, to Jedi Master Yoda, and I just love when he's educating Luke Skywalker in the Dagobah Swamp about, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. And remember that we are luminous beings. So again, reach out for help as often as you need to, and keep reaching out for help. And for people who want to help, again, being an active listener, just showing up and showing that you care about them, letting people know you care about them. That is a very powerful thing. And that's Forrest Gump said, I think. That's all I got to say about that. All right, y'all take care, and well, that's it. Just reach out for help. Keep reaching out for help. Easier said than done, but that's how you do it. That's how you start the recovery journey. All right, y'all take care, and Boston strong.